We made it. We've arrived at week 18, and I was thinking, and Dan, I know I've mentioned this in multiple shows. I think Layla I mentioned it last week too. That my 10th year on the Bears beat, I think I've covered like one legitimately consequential week 18 game since joining the beat. So, yeah, and this will be another
I
inconsequential week 18 game.
disagree. I disagree. I think this is
Well, okay,
consequential.
yes, you're right. This is very important.
And I would
The result of the game.
I would
Yeah.
argue that it may be the most consequential one that you've covered.
Yeah, yeah, yes. I mean, I will, in addition to having the Northwestern Indiana basketball game on one screen, I will certainly be paying close attention to Texans Colts. It's like
Right.
a weird, it's going to be a weird dynamic throughout the game because, like, I don't know how much the broadcast, the TV broadcast is going to reference this because, like, the league doesn't necessarily want to promote this idea of, well, if you lose, you get the number one pick. But certainly all of us watching will be checking the score constantly of what's going on with Houston, Indianapolis.
Yeah,
I
we all
had a
know what's
brief-
going on. It's okay to say it. Like we're all friends here. We know what ideally the Bears could get the number one overall pick. That's huge. We're allowed to say that.
Yeah, I mean it would be pretty monumental, and certainly Dan, if you told me that Justin Fields came close to breaking the record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in a season, and if you told me they had a 4-game stretch where they scored 29 points in a row, and if you told me that their takeaways went up, I probably wouldn't have told you they'd get the number one pick, but they had the nice recipe for being just that bad. And still having kind of success from your quarterback and getting this to this point where they have a very good shot. Because I was saying this the other day, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, there is no upside to winning that game, none. Like you will hurt your draft status and you will give your division rival the number one pick.
Jeff
So,
Saturday's
again,
resume.
I don't know how.
There it is.
There you go. Yeah, I wonder if Jim Irsay might be coming down to the sideline to make some calls himself. Because also, if you're the Colts and you have this relationship with your GM and the Bears GM, don't you want the Bears to get the number one pick in case that's the team? Because the Texans aren't going to trade the number one pick to Indianapolis if they want to go draft Bryce Young. So I think the whole thing is kind of entertaining from that. Here's what I want, though, guys. I want chaos. I want Texans to be 2-touchdown lead. And I want Nathan Peterman with the ball down 2 with a chance to go downfield just to see what happens. I think it'd be hilarious.
I almost thought of a scenario where, say, you start to see each individual Bear that you're familiar with just taken out with each respective drive. Like, and the same thing happening in Houston, where it's like, oh, yeah, watch this. Oh, yeah, watch this. And then you just keep watching both games because you know they're watching each other to see who can become the worst on that day. But that's probably just my entertainment brain talking.
I like that idea. I think the Bears still might come out on top no matter what because of their quarterback. The other thing, too, is I kind of like this idea that Lovey's going to want to win. I mean, Matt Eberflus does, too. But I just think like Lovey maybe might want to, because there's some rumors flying, right? You're wondering if he's going to be a one and done there. And the tumult that team has had over the past few years, like, does he want to almost stick it to them and get the dub?
Oh, that's savvy. I like that a lot.
You're at Haugh now. We had Mark Grody on early in the show, and he was saying last couple days have felt a little bit like the last day of school in among the media contingent there. Are you feeling that today?
Yeah, well, I just got back from the locker room, and you already saw some players with the giant garbage bags, packing up their locker. So it is like, I mean, the quarterback switch, Dan, kind of really was the catalyst for that. I think everybody's kind of ready for last day of school, ready for this season to be over. But then when we don't get that one last opportunity to see what Justin Fields, can try out. We don't get that one last chance to see, hey, maybe we'll see a big Fields to Claypool play. You just there's very few things within that game that are going to be tangible, I guess, because so much of the season has been about looking forward, right? Like, they might not even have Kyler Gordon. He's questionable. I mean, there is going to be a who's who at cornerback. Guys that literally just joined the team in the past couple of weeks could be starting at corner. I think there's only maybe 3 guys who started week 1 on defense who are going to be starting on Sunday. So you put all that together, and yeah, you definitely get second semester senior year vibes here at Haugh.
Wow. So what is it? Is it Justin Jones, Morrow, and Al-Qadim Muhammad?
I just had this up. Justin Jones, Nicholas Morrow, and Muhammad. Yeah, Muhammad, I don't know if he'll start because he hasn't been starting. And then if Jaquan Brisker, he'll be.
Brisker. Okay.
Yeah. But
Wow.
there's only a handful of guys that have started all 16 games on both sides of the ball. It's very, very few guys, which is not too abnormal for the NFL. But I think when the drop off in talent, you already don't have a lot of talent in your starters, and then you go down to your backups. It's more noticeable. Like I'll be honest, all due respect to the guys who were playing corner, I hadn't really heard of them until they got signed. So
I don't think you're alone in that. I do also want to take it a step further because I think you already have some questions that you know are on your mind as far as the last day of media availability, which is scheduled for next week. What are some questions that you have that are independent of this game's outcome or even what happens in the days before that you know you're going to ask about this Bears team? Like, for example, I think Justin Jones is a part of that group. Or how do you see certain people moving forward? What are some of your questions that you have?
yeah, actually, Justin Jones, it's funny you mentioned that. He was just brought up by Mark Potash and Matt Eberflus' last press conference of the regular season. We'll get him with Ryan Poles next week. And it's weird because Justin Jones has not been obviously as productive as you want out of that position. He was plan B for them, but he's someone who's been okay, and he's probably been the most impactful guy in that line. And again, not saying a ton, but Eberflus did say he pulled Justin Jones aside recently to kind of tell him how much he's improved over the year. And that's someone who, like if the Bears bring in a Jalen Carter, for example, or they go out and sign a Daron Payne, you have a nice piece there in Justin Jones that you give a reliable guy you can rotate through there. I think when we meet with Poles, the number one question is going to be his evaluation of Justin Fields and next steps for Fields. What do they want to see more of? And then after that is what do they need to do around him? And that's kind of a general question that we'll get more specific with as we get to combine and free agency and the draft and things like that. But I think with polls, it's also be evaluating some of these guys. We've talked about this before. That free agent group, Justin Jones included, you didn't find that diamond in the rough with any of those guys. You did not get the Akeem Hicks. So that just adds to the laundry list of players they need to add. And how's he evaluating his draft class? Like, what does he think of how Velus Jones' season went and Velus Jones' potential? What about Kyler Gordon? Do they still want him to be a full, nickel and outside guy? And what do they think of his season? So I think there's a lot of that to get at when we get with Ryan Poles next week.
I would love to actually ask Matt Eberflus about this. I know I don't want to torture him because I know he can't answer, but he's in an impossible situation now. And the way he just had to stumble through the Justin Fields isn't playing announcement was absolutely comical. And I kind of felt bad for him of what he couldn't say, what he was trying so hard to make it clear he couldn't say, etc. But I would like to just kind of ask him and say, hey, Matt, is this weird for you? Is it strange when your boss has done everything he can do to try to ensure that the team doesn't win this game? And even going back to Quinn and Roquan Smith and how liberally he's placed guys on IR, he's been win-proofing this team for a while. I'd love to know, have they talked about what's going on and how is he supposed to keep fighting for the hits principle and doing his job?
Yeah, it's a great point, Dan, and I think part of that is you're kind of putting trust in their partnership, Eberflus and Poles. That Eberflus has understood every step of this and knows. Like if Ryan Poles succeeds in what he's trying to do, like he's been very upfront. He wants to build something that's consistent. He doesn't want to have like that 2018 blip and then you're back down to that 2001 blip and then you're back down. He wants something that lasts. So if Matt Eberflus is on board with that, they're kind of, he's understanding what's going on. But the thing is, and actually Jason Leisure just brought this up in the press conference, trying to kind of get Eberflus to open up a little bit about the challenges this season. He didn't go there too much, but like the thing about Matt Eberflus is he is like a true football guy, right? Like every time you talk to him, everybody you talk to who knows him, like he is just your old school, like all football all the time. And a lot of the coaches are wired like that too. Like, we couldn't get anybody to give us an evaluation of Justin Fields this week because Lucas is like, well, I'm planning for the Vikings. And quarterback coach Andrew Noka is like, I got to get Nathan Peterman ready for the Vikings. We're like, well, we're not talking to you again for months. So, like, can you give us something on the quarterback? But I think, like, there just is this sense among coaches that, like, they're just going to do what they have to do and work with what they have, right? It's that Gene Hackman line from Hoosiers, like, my team is on the court. Like,
Right,
I think that's just...
or Tom Thibodeau, we have more than enough to win.
Yeah, like, I just think that that's the way that Eberflus is. Like, he gets it. He knows what's happening. He's had to know since day one what Ryan Poles' plan is. But, like, the way he is as a football guy, he's just like, well, these are the guys I have. We're going to try to create the best game plan to beat the Vikings on Sunday.
I will say this. Eberflus, to me, has been a non-issue as far as a rookie head coach. I don't think they've been in a position where there's been some decision-making that you could argue was that much on the line. But I think as far as the coaching question, you can't argue that he hasn't done his job. I think he's done his job and then some.
Yeah, I would agree. As you said, there haven't been a whole lot of those. Like, for example, he has not challenged a play that then turned into a touchdown for the other team.
Right.
Like John Fox.
Right. So
Benny Cunningham, right?
Yeah, there haven't been that many opportunities for things like that. They haven't had too many. I mean, they played close games, but there haven't been like these big decisions. I think that, the Giants game, I remember talking about the clock management, things like that. But from a game management standpoint, there just hasn't been a whole lot to gripe about.
Right.
And it hasn't been a whole lot to discuss. And I think we have seen some players really buy into what he's trying to do, what he's trying to instill here. It's just, it's just really hard to also evaluate that because, and I know I mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago, like if this team's a contender in 2024, like what kind of head coach is Matt Eberflus then? And is he the right head coach for that group? And he might be. I think the Bears hope he is, obviously. If they're a contender next year, like we'll learn more about him as this team, as the talent grows and that they get into these situations where they are in close games, where they are winning games. We'll learn a lot more about him. But just from a first-year standpoint, it did remind me a little bit of the John Fox, Ryan Pace first year, where it was like, you just got to come here and fix what was left. There's I hate using the word culture because it's a buzzy word, but like they did have to fix something here and restart. And he seems like the right coach to have done that. And I think the difference between him and John Fox is it's his first time as a head coach. So he, not to say John Fox wasn't putting full effort in, but there's a difference when you have a guy who's on his third time as a head coach versus a guy who this has been his dream and he finally got it. So I think you did have the nice combination of he being the right guy for this specific team and the fact that for him this is his first crack at this and he wants to succeed.
I also think, though, that there are times where you've seen him talk a little more pointedly about decision-making, even when he talked about drafting an off-ball linebacker in a certain spot. I think you saw that a little bit then. I know that's been a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. But Eberflus does have some, I think, more defined direction pieces than we probably have seen. I do want to see what happens, though. When you do need to take a shot before the end of the half to gain some momentum, or when you need to manage a clock, or how are you calling something in when there's a 2-minute drill to go, other than the ones we've seen this year. But I do think he's playing his cards a little more close to the vest, and occasionally will give us something that we can kind of learn to define him with.
Yeah, I'll say this too, Layla. I've been pleasantly surprised with some of the ways he's talked about plays with us on Mondays after games or even during the week.
Mm-hmm.
I had very low expectations during the season based on how he is with injuries, but he has not shied away from pointing out a player who erred. Or pointing out a player who stepped up or really going into the details regardless of his offense or defense or special teams. So, and that's kind of what you want out of the role that he has of not calling plays, that he's going to play this kind of CEO. And so we have seen good examples of that, of him being open about and kind of maybe showing off that he is not just a defensive guy, that he's understanding all facets of this game to kind of, because you would like to think that he'll be an even better head coach next year too, and he'll have better talent around him, and then we see what that leads to.
Have you talked to Justin Fields about his off-season plans?
We have not. The hope is that we'll talk to Justin Fields Monday. That's locker cleanout day. We obviously didn't get a chance to talk to him this week, and I'm sure that will come up. Last year, remember he had Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney come out to Atlanta. I'm sure he's talked casually about doing something like that, and Chase Claypool's mentioned it. So I would expect some kind of thing like that where he'll be doing some work with receivers. And then the other question is what kind of individual work is he going to be doing, and will there be any differences to maybe what he did last offseason?
How many yards do you think Justin Jefferson gets?
Well, I guess the question is, when do the Vikings shut everybody down on their side too, right? Do they need to do they score a couple touchdowns and say, all right, we got this was like a practice for us, and then but I'll say this, Layla, go back to last year when every Bears cornerback was on the COVID list, and they trotted out guys from the practice squad, and they did a really nice job on the Vikings that night. So
he got 40 yards or something. I thought he was going to get 400 that day.
I know it was the Thomas Graham game so with that said, you never know, but I could see the Vikings, they'll go up 2 or 3 scores and then maybe they'll have guys rest.
They have a different coach now, and I thought that maybe this was the reckoning of not having that game last year. That has crossed my mind.
Yeah, that's true. As I said, it's going to be Sunday's going to be really weird. It's going to be just a weird setting when we're watching we'll be paying more attention to Colts Texans than maybe the game in front of us. There's only a handful of guys who will be playing Sunday who are going to be on this team next year. It's going to be a strange conclusion to this season.